According to the notorious anti-DPRK website, nknews.org, the DPRK is apparently a haven for pot smokers, and that apparently everybody does it there. Getting high is as common as just about anything else. Now, they claim that it is neither classified as illegal or policed in any way, which in fact is actually true. There are no laws on the books in North Korea about smoking marijuana. It's not actually illegal to do it. It's not actually illegal to even have it. Now, they do go on to list, a whole bunch of facts about the situation there regarding drugs. And they say that meth is illegal and that there's a history of meth problems, although they're very vague to say it's a known thing or there's a history of, but they don't actually, really go into saying anything about it. But then they say if you're caught smoking meth or you're on meth, you get executed, which is actually complete bullshit. This is one of those things where they have a source, but the source is an nkradio.org article that says the source, but doesn't say what that is. It just says the source, not a source, the source. So in other words, without any actual information, it's a pretty baseless claim. So NK News says that they get regular reports from people who have been there that this is very common. Visitors returning from North Korea, apparently, without really citing anything, but that's fine. They say that there's marijuana plants growing by the side of the road, and it's freely done, and it's just all over the place, and everybody smokes up, and it's very common. Except that if it was really so common, why have we never heard about this before? I consider myself fairly well educated on the DPRK, not only with people who've been there. I actually do know somebody in the DPRK, the North Korean Foreign Ministry, who works in Europe. So I actually do know at least one person in the actual North Korean government. And he did give me a lot of information that does contradict a great deal that's actually in this. But before I actually get to that, I just want to deal what it is that they're actually saying in the article. Because there is no known history of smoking marijuana in the DPRK. In fact, I've actually heard sources that say you get executed if you have weed, or if you smoke up, the government's going to come and kill you. Well, which is it? These old claims or nknews.org? I'm not saying nknews.org has put out articles saying that you get executed for, smoking weed, but I've heard reports from other sources that say that. Well, which is it? It's one of those, common contradictory things, like how Human Rights Watch says one thing and then Amnesty International says another thing. One says the government denies the existence of labor camps, while the other one says the government has always unfairly justified them. Well, which is it? But they claim that there's really no taboo about it around the country, which is a half-truth. It's sort of true, but I'll sort that out in a moment. They also claim this is a favorite activity of soldiers off duty, that instead of them getting addicted to cigarettes or something like that, they, smoke up in order to relax. That's not really, if this is actually true, I tend to actually believe it's not true. But if this is true, this would not make it any different than the militaries in any other country. But to get right down to it, this is their claim regarding the actual social situation and social attitudes towards marijuana in the DPRK. The reason for smoking weed in North Korea differs from America. In North Korea, you don't smoke weed purely to get high and laugh at your own hand. You do it to save money and as a break from the ubiquitous cheap local cigarettes that do more damage than good. In the black markets of North Korea, marijuana is commonly sold at cheap prices and is easily obtainable. Therefore, the drug is especially popular among the lower classes of North Korean society. After a day of hard manual labor, it is common for North Korean workers to smoke marijuana as a way to relax and soothe tight or sore muscles. If this statement is 100% true, that would be not really much different than what is done in the West. A lot of the use among marijuana, particularly among people in their 30s and above, is largely due to a lot of hard work and the fact that it does have a large muscle relaxing thing to it. So it's really not any different in that regards, and that it is more popular among the lower classes. Well, no kidding, that's the same way it is here. I'm not saying rich people don't get high. I'm saying they get high at much smaller rates, due to the fact that they don't have to suffer the same stress and daily grind that working and middle class people have to go through. So to say that this is different than the West is really not true, other than saying people don't get high just to stare at their own hand. Of course that happens in the West, and that's a large thing that does happen, particularly among younger people. It's not very common among people in their 30s and higher. That is, it is a kid thing. Again, I don't believe this is actually true about North Korea. I would not be surprised if there were people that did smoke to ease muscle tension, because it works. I don't stand here and say that nobody does weed in the DPRK. That's obviously not true. Now, however, I did speak to the person that I do know in the North Korean Foreign Ministry, and he gave me what the general real social attitude is surrounding the use of the product. Most North Koreans, just as long as you are doing your job and you're not inhibiting the enjoyment of life for others, you're not causing a disturbance in the society, you're not causing difficulties at work. Like if people are known to have a drink on the job, as long as it doesn't interfere with the actual functioning of the employment, then people don't care. But if that does start to get in the way, this does start to affect a person's life in a negative way, or it tends to inhibit the workplace at all, then there's a social attitude where they all just kind of self-police themselves. Tell the person, you're getting out of control, this is unacceptable, kind of thing. That's not actually done by the law. It's a general social attitude, and that this is what the attitude that the actual people of North Korea actually genuinely do have. Now, the only real drug that's used most commonly, marijuana, from my sources, it's not as widespread as this article is claiming it. This article basically says everybody does it, they grow it in their houses, it's everywhere, which is a completely baseless assertion. This is the first time we're hearing about it. If this was always going on, then we would have been hearing about this for a long time. Now, my source says the most common thing that is around a drug that's used commonly by people is homemade corn whiskey, and mostly that's drunken by farmers on special occasions. That's not any different than a lot of other countries. Homemade liquor is common among other countries as well. He did confirm that it is not illegal to smoke weed in the DPRK. It's not even generally illegal to have it. Because there's no law regarding it, if you're caught smoking it or you're caught having it, it's really up to the individual officer what actually happens. You could get a cop that's just a hard ass about it and is going to give you a hard time. Or you get one that's just not going to care. It's just like, don't do that in public, go home. So it's really up in the air because there's no actual written laws regarding it, because it's not even classified technically as a narcotic. So there is a very relaxed social attitude for it. And one of the great ironies is the DPRK is such a terrible totalitarian dictatorship. Why is it that they can smoke up without going to jail? Which is something that in a good majority of the US, you can't actually do. Now, it's also a thing that if you're a foreigner and you go into the country, like say you're on a tour or what have you, and you have marijuana in your bag, as she said, the most likely what would happen to you, they would confiscate it, destroy it, and probably blacklist you from coming back into the country. While it's not technically illegal, they certainly don't want anything that makes them look bad. Obviously, not a lot of countries would have that. Basically, if you sneak marijuana into the country, like a personal use size, you're just going to get it confiscated and get blacklisted from the country. Now, you do that in the U.S., you even just bring a personal amount in, you could be looking at trafficking. You could be looking at a long time in jail just for merely possessing, a personal stash for yourself. Never mind, huge amounts of trafficking, just your own personal use. In a lot of places, you're looking at a long time in jail just for that, which is absolutely ridiculous. So here, it's a hell of a lot more free in North Korea than it is here regarding that issue. Now, You can get in a lot of trouble. Say if you had like a truckload of weed, or you had like a truckload of meth. Now, despite the claims, people who are on meth don't get executed. That's a completely baseless claim. They offer people help. They don't just go around shooting drug addicts in the street, like Colombia, another great U.S. client. But yeah, people aren't executed for being on meth. If you're trafficking a huge amount of it, yeah, you're going to go to a firing squad, pretty much. Because trafficking is just not tolerated. They do seem to have, at least perhaps unintentionally, a policy of the traffickers, not the use of it, of not persecuting the addict, but of the person who puts it out there. So at least in that way, it's even actually more progressive than the United States. So you don't get killed for doing drugs. Marijuana is, to a large degree, not a big issue in the DPRK. Not a lot of people actually do it. It's not actually legal because there isn't a problem with it. It's more like a social attitude towards drinking. A lot of people drink, and it's not thought of as a big deal. But if it starts to inhibit, your life, it starts causing a problem in your life, or it starts causing problems at work. Well, then there's a social mechanism. People generally get concerned and confront you on it. Intervention, I guess you could call it. But that's the real general idea of the social attitudes and the government policy towards marijuana in the DPRK. And I just thought it'd be important, because it's one of my functions here, is to correct these things that people say about the DPRK. That this is the real social attitude, and actually, generally speaking, marijuana is not considered a big deal in North Korea at all.